Hey guys, what is going on? My name is Brian and today we are here coming back with a very unique type of video. I've never done this before, but we're going to be knocking out 3 countries all in one shot. This right here is the rise and fall of the Baltics. So if you've been following this channel for a while, you would already know that I'm actually pretty darn obsessed with the Baltic states. I've said it once and I will say it again. I personally am a big fan of the Baltic states. I believe it is the hidden treasure of the world, and that's the main reason why I am so freaking in love with it. With that being said, I have also met several of you, and a lot of you have actually been helping me out learn a little bit more about your country. So let's see if maybe this video actually could teach me a thing or two. I doubt it, but maybe. I'm kidding, probably something. Now before I babble on too much, how about we get right into this one, my friends? You guys know I like to talk. In case you guys were not aware, I'm actually grabbing this video from another YouTuber here on this platform, and his name is Masaman, and this was a video he actually recently released talking about the rise and fall of the Balts. So how about we go right ahead and we check it out, and you guys can send me a message to my Instagram page because it's right over there, and you can let me know what are your thoughts and if you've actually seen this video before. Let me know if you learned something new, alright? It's okay. It's okay. We're all learning stuff, right? Without further ado,
in Eastern Europe, many seemingly insignificant post-Soviet states have popped up in the past few decades, but believe it or not, one of these small groups nearly dominated the eastern half of Europe for several centuries in the not-so-distant past, and were also one of the lesser-known powers to colonize the Americas, yet they're a group that very few outsiders discuss or care for outside of sensationalist news, being virtually non-existent from most American curriculum. I am, of course, mentioning the Baltic region and people, a category that includes Estonians, Latvians, and Lithuanians, and even though Estonians do not belong to the same ethno-linguistic group, this loose
he did say something important,
far more in common than
and not many people speak about the Baltics.
And quite the interesting history. Although the Baltic nations may not seem too impressive,
I know here in the United States they didn't teach me anything about it until I met my wife, actually.
And falling quickly, they still hold influence over many of the surrounding countries and beyond due to their legacy as one of Europe's strongest empires to ever exist.
I realize that map says the Gulf of Riga.
The Baltic Sea, although it gets a bit more complicated.
That's interesting.
Later. And currently includes the 3-ish ethnic groups of the Estonians in the north, a Finno-Ugric group related to the Finns, Sami, and the Hungarians very distantly, the Latvians in the middle, and Lithuanians in the south, with the latter two of these actually belonging to the Baltic proper language family, being the last two surviving members of this group. The Baltic language family was previously classified as a branch of Slavic, separate from the northern varieties, but in more recent years, the Baltic family has been recognized as being distinct from the surrounding Slavic languages such as Polish, Russian, and Belarusian, although the two most likely have a common origin in the greater Indo-European language family. Although Baltic groups, or Balts, like the Latvians and Lithuanians, do not consider themselves to be Slavs, even though I myself am guilty of simplifying this in the past. In reality, although these two languages are not...
My girl considers herself to be Slavic as hell, so...
quite easily distinguished from all other European languages, and their history and genetics are deeply tied to that of Germany, Scandinavia, the Finns, and of course the Slavs. Being one of the most ancient groups in Europe, the Uralic tribes of northern Eurasia were some of the first people to have inhabited the Baltic region, meaning they were of the same lineage as the Finns, Estonians, Karelians, and others in the Ural mountain range and Siberia, and this can be seen by the impact in the Baltic languages, culture,
first time I hear that,
as the haplogroup distribution among Estonians, Latvians, and Lithuanians is nearly identical, being dominated by haplogroup N, originating in Siberia, and R1A, which is associated with early Indo-European migrants, especially Slavs and other Eastern Europeans. However, outside of this region, genetically speaking, the closest people to the modern Baltic ethnicities would have to be Russians from the northwest region of the country, as ethnic Russians from this region have heavy admixture from the native people, including Uralic and Baltic tribes, who were largely assimilated during the Russian expansion.
That is true. I know there's a lot of Russians in each Baltic country, actually. A decent amount, like 25% on average.
And aforementioned eponymous Balts, with the latter being divided between the Eastern and Western Balts, perhaps with one of the most famous Western Baltic groups being the Prussians, and being one of the last pockets of Europe yet to be Christianized, the Baltic peoples saw themselves in an ever-decreasing world of the old European pagans. Although many Balts were initially fiercely resistant to the
paganism seems to be very practiced. I know in Latvia it's practiced heavily. Is it practiced in your country, like in Estonia or Lithuania?
All paganistic influences launched a religious campaign against the Baltic pagans and other pagans of Northern Europe, with invasions coming from the Holy Roman Empire, known as the Teutonic Knights or Order, as well as Scandinavia. Baltic pagan groups like the Prussians or Yatvingians were conquered and forcibly assimilated into the Holy Roman Empire, while the other Baltic nations, such as Estonia and Latvia, became vassals of Sweden and Denmark. Hence, these nations were Lutheran, much like in Scandinavia and parts of Germany, while the Lithuanians became Catholic due to the German influence, as thousands of Germanic and Scandinavian settlers began to settle in this region, especially the former Baltic Prussia. In fact, the old Prussian nation became so heavily
I had just recently discovered about the Lutheran religion, actually.
Disappeared altogether in a matter of centuries, with the last Prussian speaker dying in the early 1700s, with the entirety of the Prussians and other Western Baltic peoples being assimilated into the new Germanic population. But hey, the Germans did co-opt the name of Prussian as their own. But interestingly, the name Baltic or Baltan is actually Germanic in origin, as the original German settlers of this region used the term strictly to refer to themselves, while the native tribes were referred to as Latvies or Litvis. But due to intermarriage and assimilation, the Prussian Germans, especially those in the East, were very heavily influenced by the Slavic and native Baltic nations in both culture and genetics, although they still established themselves as the upper class in much of this region. In addition to the three Baltic nations mentioned earlier, there was also formerly a Finno-Ugric group known as the Livonians, who formerly inhabited what is now western Latvia. However, following centuries...
Yes, I had my girl had explained to me about the Livonians before,
extinct,
and how now it's like mixed into like Latvia as a whole.
Identifying as ethnic Livonians today. But the entire Baltic peoples would not disappear into the night, as also during this time, Lithuania, the southernmost surviving Baltic nation, was rising against both the Germans to the west and the Slavs in the east, with Lithuanians expanding into the neighboring Principality of Rus, although it wasn't until the 14th century that the Grand Duchy of Lithuania officially adopted Catholicism as the state religion, making it the last paganistic European power in history.
Wow.
Lithuania absorbed many territories that lie in modern-day Belarus and Ukraine, and established itself as a major regional power in Europe, but following the merger of the Kingdom of Poland and the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, their influence had expanded even further, although of course during this time ethnic Lithuanians...
I think that's so weird that Russia has that little point right there. It's so odd.
Ethnic monarchy, also having large minorities of Germans, Eastern Slavs, Lithuanian or Lipka Tatars who arrived from the Urals, and of course Ashkenazi Jews, with the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth at one point holding the majority of Jews on Earth, being the center of the Jewish community worldwide. There were also other Baltic powers loosely associated with the Polish-Lithuanian Union, such as the Duchy of Courland and Semigalia, a Lithuanian vassal established by German migrants, and Courland was also one of the only non-Western European powers to ever colonize the Americas, other than the Russians and Alaska, of course, with the Curonian colony in the Caribbean island of Tobago being briefly involved in a trade war in the region. But the Polish-Lithuanian superpower was still constantly warring with and against neighboring powers such as the French, Germans, Russians, and Swedes, almost completely collapsing to the latter of these on a multitude of occasions, and the Lithuanians and Poles lost much of their territory to Prussia, Russia, and Austria in the 18th century following invasions by these foreign groups. Although surrounded on all sides by mostly hostile nations, the Poles, Lithuanians, and other Balts wished
I love how he said that so casually.
The power of these gargantuan states. But of course, we all know how that turned out, as a series of further partitions wiped the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth off the map entirely, with the bulk of this former Grand Empire being given to the Russians, including the Baltic nations of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. For a couple of centuries afterwards, the Baltic states were an integral part of the Russian Empire, and although never quite returning to their former glory, they were still highly sought after by both Russia, Germany, Poland, and Sweden for their ideal geographical placement.
It really
is. For many important ports for trade and exploration. Many Balts, but especially Lithuanians, would travel outside of the Russian Empire, even as far as Canada, Argentina, but especially Brazil and the United States,
Yes.
both of which have some of the largest Lithuanian diasporas in the world.
And
The
Latvians as
Baltic
well in
states
Brazil.
would briefly gain independence following the collapse of the Russian Empire during World War I, although during World War II the Baltic states were once again invaded and occupied by Nazi Germany, which utterly decimated the population, and the Balts had, and still do, have very mixed feelings on the Soviet liberation of their territory, as the states were forcibly reincorporated into the USSR, and the previously numerous Baltic, German, and Swedish communities were deported almost in their entirety, including the German city of Königsberg, neighboring Lithuania, which of course became the Russian Oblast of Kaliningrad. Since the fall of the Soviet Union, the Baltic states have suffered.
You know, I know
from some
very
of the
little
most
about that little
pronounced
piece of land there,
population
actually.
decline in the world, losing over a fourth of their population in only a matter of decades. And this has been caused by demographic factors such as low birth rates, high suicide and death rates, but also an
Wow, that got dark real quick.
towards Western Europe, especially the United Kingdom in recent years. The population of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, about 1, 2, and 3 million people respectively, is actually about the same as it was in the 1930s before World War II, as clearly being in the center of the largest armed conflict in history cost the Balts a huge toll, suffering some of the highest per capita deaths for any country outside of the USSR or Poland. As a sort of quick fix for the extreme decrease in manpower, large numbers of citizens from the rest of the Soviet Union were encouraged to settle in this region, and because of this there are still very large Slavic minorities in every Baltic nation, and although Latvia and Lithuania have still retained their Christian culture for the most part, Estonia today is one of the most
I love how
irreligious countries
Estonia,
in the world,
like right there
as
you
well
can
as being
see
one of the most
that they don't
tech-savvy,
believe in God as
internet-connected
much.
ones. And
It's
interestingly,
interesting,
a large
'cause I've
radio
heard several of you
movement
said
has
that-
appeared
say
in the
that.
Baltic states, as in other parts of Europe, harkening back to their pre-Crusader days, although the whole European neo-paganist revival is honestly a topic for another day. Before we sign off, I just want to remind everyone that I've actually created a survey designed to gauge some of the demographic traits of my audience. So if you haven't participated in the Masaman channel,
Talk
since
about
2018,
dedication.
this next week will be the last
Good
few
job,
days
Masaman.
to it before I post my analysis video, which I am beyond ecstatic to do. So, link in the description, be sure to check it out. It takes about 6 minutes and you can view the results when you've finished. So, in conclusion, although the Lithuanians and other Balts were arguably the kings of Eastern Europe at one point, and they may not seem too terribly significant in today's global landscape, they still have connections with
that's where they go
many
wrong.
regions of Europe and throughout the world. So go ahead and let me know your thoughts on the Estonians, Latvians, and Lithuanians. And for today's poll, let me know which Baltic nation is of the most interest to you personally. And as always, thanks so much for watching. This has been Mason, and I'll see you next time.
Nice. So I really gotta hand it to this guy. If you guys want to check out the original video, it is actually linked down in the description box. Besides this guy being like a freaking college professor, like, did you guys feel like, I felt like I was sitting down through like a school presentation, but regardless, it actually was very, very informative. I did learn a few additional things that I was not aware of. So I was actually not aware of the situation that apparently there's a lot of Lithuanians also living in Brazil. I know that does also go for a lot of Latvians. It's one of the biggest, most concentrated populations, but also here in the United States, there is a big community in Washington because that's where they have their embassy. In New York and here in South Florida, they have an okay amount. As for Estonians, I've actually been running into a little bit more Estonians ever since I've started studying more about the culture and meeting many of you. I've been running into like customers at like my like normal job. I forget I have a job. It's so weird sometimes. But yeah, I definitely run into a couple of Baltic people. Probably, I don't know, like once every 2-3 months. But I do have to agree with this guy as to why it's so desirable to have the Baltic states and as to why Russia and so many other people have been fighting to get control over the Baltic states. Like, they are geographically in a very, very good position. Mind you, got Sweden right across, you got Finland on the other side, and like, mind you could block off like just about anything there, and it really does give them an advantage actually. So I actually just recently saw a movie, and I hope I'm recalling the detail right, so please don't kill me if I'm wrong. I know with Latvia, the Germans and the Russians were actually fighting to gain territory, and they actually pretty much like almost divided the country and pretty much had them fighting against themselves. and sadly, a lot of casualties did occur. Back in 2017, I actually had the opportunity to go to Liepāja for the first time, and walking on the beach, I had Kintija actually explain to me, which, by the way, I keep bringing her up. If you guys were not aware, she's actually the person right behind the camera, so I know you guys don't see her, but she helps out. She's the editor and producer for this channel. You guys could check out her link down below. But we were walking on the beach of Liepāja, and we actually saw like those big letters, which you can actually check out the picture right here. And she was explaining to me as to how a lot of deaths had occurred, and a lot of people were actually just getting buried like there, like on the beach. Which I also wanted to clarify a little thing. I mentioned earlier that she considers herself Slavic. I do want to explain a little bit more into that, because I know some of you are going to be like, triggered. But the reason why she considers herself Slavic, we recently did an ancestry DNA test, and we found out that she is really Polish, like extremely Polish. With the last name like Borska, we actually found out that she's about like 60 to 70% Polish, which is the reason why I go ahead and say that. I really gotta give it up to this guy. He really did a phenomenal job explaining as to how a lot of the how Lithuania, Estonia, and Latvia developed their actual religion. So like paganism or Lutheran, or even not even believing in God. I'm personally not really religious. I'm actually agnostic, so I'm open to the idea of it, but I'm like, I'm like more against the wall for it. But with that being said, I definitely did recently discover paganism due to the Baltic states, and looking more into it, it really made a lot more sense. I could definitely go for like the whole spiritual and nature aspect of it. It makes much more sense to me personally. How do you guys feel about what he said? Is there something that you agree or even disagree with? Or something that he missed out on that you think is a major point? Make sure you guys are leaving these comments down below. I do skimmed right through them. Or you guys can send it onto my Instagram page. It is once again down there if you want to check it out. Or you guys can make this into like a freaking school project and even mail it to my P.O. box. I don't know if you guys were aware, I actually have a P.O. box. So in case you wanted to like send some little letter and just say hello, or maybe like a postcard or something, you guys could definitely do so. Anyways, my friends, I really appreciate you guys watching. I know Estonia has been telling me about the relationship, the minor relationship, I guess, with Hungary, and I definitely got to look a little bit more into the Hungarian culture, so I could just, make the full circle, right? We already covered Finland, Estonia, Lithuania, and Latvia. Let's throw Hungarian there. It's going to be very interesting seeing the comment section of this, having a bit of Estonians, a bit of Latvians, and a bit of Lithuanians all mingling in the same place. But, we gotta bring the people together, right? My friends, if you want to support what we do here on this channel, you can definitely do so. We have a Patreon page right over here that you can check it out. It has a little bit of amazing perks there, so you should definitely check it out. And let me know if you have any questions. I will try my best to answer them. But anyways, my friends, thank you guys so much for watching. I shall see you on the flip side, and until next time, hasta la pasta. Bye. What?